Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining this talk for the Move Data Conference. If you don't know me, my name is Ben Rogshan, and today we're going to be focusing on my talk, which is I'm calling Less is More. So just a lesson or lessons that I picked up, putting together multiple companies' kind of data infrastructure over the last few years. Just a quick note about me. If you don't know me, you probably can find me under the Seattle Data Guy. I focus on helping companies set up their end-to-end data solutions. This could mean, doing things as simple as just finding the right solutions for them or helping them migrate to the cloud. In terms of like industries that I have consulted in, it's really all over the board, from finance, insurance, transportation, etc. And I like to say that I'm an accidental YouTuber and writer. So you can find me both on YouTube as well as Substack and a few other places. So that's a little bit about me, but let's get into the talk because I didn't want to spend too much time with an intro. All right, so for the overview for this talk, really we're going to talk about what's really important when you kind of set up your data infrastructure. And recently I read this article that I think has been going around about, someone who's accidentally saved $500,000 for their company by switching some stuff around in Snowflake. And one of the sections that stood out to me was the part that you see on the screen, essentially discussing, how a file is essentially passed around from one place to another, Python, Lambda, MongoDB. There's just so many layers that get involved in this one solution. And, it's one of those things that reminds me that it's really easy to go from a very simple solution or a simple problem and develop a complex overall solution. So that's why we're going to kind of focus on today, talking about actually talking to the business, figuring out what they actually need, and making sure we implement what they need and not just what we read. And after that, we'll kind of talk about some of the results from when you follow a little more of that behavior versus trying to follow maybe more of like using infrastructure for infrastructure's sake kind of patterns. So let's dive into that. All right, so first, I think what's really important as data people is we aren't brought on to companies to build infrastructure just because we build infrastructure. We are brought on to solve real problems that they are dealing with. So number one, generally when I work with a company, especially if it's a greenfield project, I try to make sure that we align with what the business cares about. Like we need to figure out what matters, what's going to like actually save them money, where can we actually impact their bottom line, and what's actually the problems that they're dealing with. The thing here is like you don't always, you can't always just go ask the business what are your problems or where can we save you money. Generally, the way I'd recommend people align with the business here is talk to the business and understand what actually happens. Like go to a financial analyst, understand what their daily workflows look like. Go to operations and understand what their kind of day-to-day looks like. What are they trying to solve? What are their problems? And figure out where data can kind of fit in. I think we, as the data people, tend to be the ones that sometimes need to figure out where that bridge is. Not just, letting other teams kind of define what we do, but maybe looking into what they're working on and applying our knowledge to actually solve those business problems, again, rather than waiting for them to try to define it, because sometimes they might not know what is possible, and we generally know that. So step one in all of this, I'll always say, is align with the business to actually build things that they care about. Because at the end, if you build something, even if it's simple, even if it's cost effective, if it doesn't deliver value, you've still spent time in the wrong direction. So generally, step one is make sure you're doing what the business needs you to do. Next, as you're kind of doing that, you kind of need to understand the business ask. So as you're developing these solutions, as you're coming up with ideas, obviously they're going to add in their own ideas, their own requirements as you're going through the process of trying to understand what they need. A common request is like real time, right? Like everyone's like, we need real time, we want real time data. And making sure you actually dig into that and understand, like, okay, why? What is the end goal of this real-time data dashboard or result that I'm giving you? Are you actually using it in real time? Is it just something that you've heard before other teams use? Is your definition of real time even the same as the one I am thinking of? Because for me, that generally means data is updated as soon as it's inserted in operations. It's essentially updated in the analytics side. So make sure that you're even on the same framework there. Because I've had plenty of conversations where people start with, we want real time, and very quickly, you find out that once a day, once an hour, once a week is sometimes sufficient based on their use cases. Similarly, you could say the same thing about like ML or even building a dashboard. I think dashboards tend to be where we, as data people, jump to, but sometimes that's not what a person needs. It's obviously the pretty thing. It's obviously the maybe flashier end result. But at the end of the day, it might just be something that gets built and never looked at again. So sometimes you have to kind of find out that balance between, is this something that needs a dashboard, or is this just something that needs a temporary report, versus trying to put a ton of resources into building something that will be permanent, essentially. So again, step one, understand what the business actually needs, and then step two, after you kind of understand the business case, understand if what they're asking for in terms of requirements actually even makes sense. Like, why are they asking it? What's the actual value? How are they actually using it? Is it going to be real time, etc. Next, I like to say assess where you're at. Don't just read something in an article and think we should build that. This image that I put up is actually in one of my articles, and it talks about how you kind of go through varying levels of infrastructure. The whole point was like, hey, maybe your company will look like this. It'll have all these different layers, all these different solutions. You'll have orchestration, lineage, security, etc. But maybe your company is not that far. Maybe you're just getting started. Maybe you're just starting to build your data prowess. And so you're just ingesting data and doing some basic analytics on that. And that's okay, right? You don't want to spend your entire time and all your resources building out systems without actually delivering value. So generally, having an iterative approach to how you build your infrastructure, building it one piece at a time, one use case, in terms of like making sure you have that success, that you can get more buy-in from the business, is generally a great way to ensure you kind of balance the need to build reliable infrastructure with also infrastructure that's delivering. Because that's kind of a challenge that we have as data people, is that we need to both build things that can be maintainable, but also build things that are delivering quickly, so the business believes and trusts in us to continue doing that over a long period of time. So yeah, don't just read something and be like, okay, Uber's doing this, or Facebook's doing this, or I read an article from someone that maybe has a lot of followers, and so thus I assume this is what I should do. But really ask yourself if you should build this, if that's the right fit for you at the moment. If you don't have a team of people to manage, say, Airflow and self-host, you probably shouldn't self-host Airflow if you've got 30 other things to do, and that's just one of the small things you want to manage. There are other options, and you should look into things that actually make sense for your team, for your skill set, as well as for where your company is. You want to make sure you're actually meeting them where they're at, and again, not just putting together things that you read. All right, so the results of this, kind of what I think about at the end of the day, building what you need versus kind of gold plating and RDD or resume driven development. Generally, what I end up seeing is when people build things that are simple, they're easy to maintain, they have clear ROI, they're built and can handle change. But it's not always exciting. I have a solution that I built for one of my clients that really is pretty straightforward. And all it really does is pull data from it. Some S3 buckets, has some Snowflake transforms on it, and pushes to some key dashboards. And that has lasted this entire time. The company hasn't had to hire new employees. And even when they had a problem 8 months later, they ended up being able to solve it. They reached out to me. By the time I got back to them, they'd already solved it. So really overall, I find that if you build what you need in general, it's pretty easy to maintain. Obviously, there are more complex use cases. I'm not going to deny that some people actually do have genuinely complex use cases that need more complex solutions. But for a lot of people out there, I think you'll often find that a simpler solution that may seem boring is probably the right solution. On the flip side, what you end up having is, kind of one of the big issues I often have to get called in for is like key person dependency problems, which basically means you built something, no one else knows how to maintain it except you, or you're building just infrastructure for infrastructure's sake. In the end, you generally have like unclear ROI. It might look great on your resume, but overall, it might not be good, and it might not be the actual solution that your data team or your business teams need. And with that, guys, I just want to wrap up this whole talk and say thank you so much for watching. I hope you go check out some of the other talks today, but I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks and goodbye.